Hello, everyone. Rivka here again. Hope you guys have had a great day. I am addressing a particular passage that has been coming up over and over and over again in the past week, and I'm finally just fed up with it, and I'm going to do a video kind of debunking two things that are used this passage is used for. So I'm talking about Mark 7. This passage is typically used for one of two things or both. Usually it's used to say, well, Yeshua made all foods clean, and we don't have to keep kosher anymore, and he made everything clean, and we can eat pork and we can eat whatever we want. So you'll see in a few minutes that makes no sense. Secondly, it's used to say, look, the bad Pharisees, they have traditions like hand washing and ritual purity laws and da 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 da. So those are the two reasons it's bashed or used by Christians and used by Messianics who won't use it in one sense, but will use it to say, look, the traditions of the Pharisees and the sages are bad and we don't follow them. So I'm going to read the chapter and make comments on it and really give you the context of who he's talking to, why he's saying it, what the actual discussion is, because this is probably one of the most understood passages. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. You can comment on this video. You can private message me, whatever, and I'll discuss it with you. But first, let's just lay down the groundwork before we even begin to read the passage. Yeshua is in the 1st century. Yeshua is a rabbi. He is called Rabbi in John. Yeshua said in Matthew 5 that the Torah is not done away with. Also, Mark, in the context, is talking to Jews. He's not talking to Goyim. This is not a Paul passage, but this is one of the ones that comes up often. So you have to have that context. 1st century, he is in John called when John is questioned by John the Immerser is questioned by the Pharisees, who are you? And he responds, one stands among you, i.e. the Pharisees, that you don't recognize. Now, there was two groups of Pharisees. Here's another context that no one ever likes to, or often does not think about. There was two groups of Pharisees. There was the Pharisees of Hillel, and there was the Pharisees of Shammai, and they had different opinions. Generally, Shammai was much more strict than Hillel. And after the 1st century, after Yeshua's death and resurrection, we have the party of Hillel took on the stringencies of Shammai later, and you can look that up on your own time. But basically, the issue here is in debate at this point. You also have the Beis Hamikdash, and you have a couple of issues historically and even Judaism says this, that the reason for the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash was sinas chinam. That's why we named our ministry Ahavas Chinam, to reverse that. And they were very, very, very concerned with purity, too concerned about purity. There was a story, and my husband has often told the story in the Talmud, that talks about two priests running up to make a sacrifice, and the other guy, they have a knife, and one has a knife, stabs the other guy to kill him, so he could make the sacrifice. And the father of the one who got stabbed is saying, oh, he's not dead yet, let's use the knife for the sacrifice because it's not impure. I mean, that's horrifying. And that story was told, it was told to say, this is bad. This is one of the reasons that our temple was destroyed. The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because a father didn't even have pity on his son. He was more concerned about the sacrifice and how it was done. So even in the rabbinic literature on the Talmud, and it's frowned upon. So it's not like Orthodox Judaism is going, yeah, that's fine, it's totally fine. So obviously not. That's not following Hashem. So with that context, hopefully that gives you some context with this passage. And keeping that in mind is super important when reading this. Now I'm reading from the Tree of Life version, but I will be mentioning other translations because that is an important factor here. So Verse 1, now the Pharisees and some of the Torah scholars who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Yeshua, and they saw some, I'm going to highlight that word, some of his disciples were eating bread with unclean hands. Not dirty, but they hadn't ritually wash their hands. So I actually went through the hand washing, which got a lot of, this is another reason Mark 7 came up, because, oh, you shouldn't do that. Yeshua said not to do that. Well, obviously here, some of his disciples did that. And nowhere in this passage does Yeshua say, hey guys, you shouldn't be doing that. It's traditional. Don't do that. So that's right there. You already know that some of his disciples had this stringency. It is not a biblical command to wash your hands before eating bread. What was a command was the Kohanim in the Beis Hamikdash washing their hands before they did their service, whether sacrifice or with the bread or whatever. It was with everything in the temple. They had to ritually purify themselves. And so the Pharisees, so I'm just going to read verse 3. For the Pharisees and all Jewish people do not eat unless they wash their hands up to the elbow, keeping with the traditions of the elders, and when they come to the marketplace, do not eat unless they perform a ritual washing. There are the many traditions that they received and hold, such as washing cups, pitchers, copper vessels. So basically, a group of Pharisees, I don't actually know why it says all Jewish people, because obviously here some of his disciples aren't doing it, but generally speaking, so this, it probably is more referring to the Pharisees who took these strictures. So he's talking to the Pharisees of Shammai at this point. He's not talking to the Pharisees of Hillel, because like I said, he was part of the Pharisaic sect of Hillel, who at this point in history did not hold to washing of hands, for even washing of hands as strictly as they do now. And even Shammai, it's been kind of downgraded. So like we only wash up to the wrist now. The Shammai wash for everything, even fruits and vegetables, which is why in Pesach you actually wash for karpas, the parsley, or the potato, whatever you use. You actually wash for that with water, but without a bracha. So that's kind of a compromise there, but that's a different topic. So it's mentioning these traditions. So the Pharisees and Torah scholars questioned Yeshua, why don't your disciples walk according to the tradition of elders? Why do they eat bread with unwashed hands? And he said to them, rightly did Isaiah prophesy about you hypocrites. It is written, the people honor you with their lips, and their heart is far from me, and in vain they worship me, teaching the the commandments of men. So this was a stricture that the Pharisees did, and it's not a biblical command. But Yeshua did not tell his disciples who were washing they shouldn't. So obviously some of his disciples were following this particular tradition. It was a in-house debate. So they're having a debate about hand washing, not about food. So a lot of times Christians will take this passage and go, see, he made all foods clean. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. So having left behind the commandment of God, you hold on to the traditions of men. So basically he's saying, you are accusing my disciples of not following the written Torah when you know it is a tradition that you have in terms of washing hands. You know it is a stricture. This is the Pharisees' Shammai, not Hillel, like I mentioned before. And I keep hammering that because people often lose the context. So it is a tradition, not a derisive command. So even in the rabbinic text today, you often have discussions with halacha, right? And you have derisive commandments, which that means in the written Torah, and then you have rabboni commandments or fences around the commandments to protect yourself from breaking it. So this particular one is a fence. This is a de rabbonim, and like I said later on in history, it was settled that all Jews, we're all going to wash our hands and bring peace between Hillel and Shammai. At this point, though, there's no agreement. So some did, some didn't, as you see here, some of his disciples. And also, too, you see Yeshua in other passages, he doesn't, when Yochanan is immersing people, that is a rabbinic thing. Mikvahing for repentance of sins, that is nowhere in the scripture. Okay, so they're doing a rabbinic thing, and Yeshua himself and his disciples were mikvahing people. So it's not like and also to even function in the temple, you had to mikvah, which was, the mikvahs were designed according to what we have today as the written oral law, but they had the tradition then to go and mikvah and the interpretations of how to function in the temple. So that's, Yeshua in other places really reaffirms, also with, you tie the mint, dill, and cumin. These things you should have done without neglecting the other things. So Yeshua is kind of shifting the conversation here between having the discussion of the halacha, should we wash our hands or shouldn't we wash our hands? Because that's kind of a, he was saying into their hearts, and he was saying, you guys are so concerned. You're more concerned with the outer appearance. He also says this later on in Matthew, about talking about I lost my phone rang and I lost my train of thought. You're like whitewashed tombs, and you're on the inside, you're beautiful on the outside and ugly on the inside. He was talking to Shammai. He was talking to certain Pharisees, because you also have Pharisees like Nicodemus, Joseph of Arimathea, who I believe was a Pharisee. I'm pretty sure he was. I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to go back and look. And then it also says that Pharisees warned Yeshua about things that were happening, like they're going to kill you, don't go, like they didn't want him to die. He ate in Pharisees' homes. Sometimes he had very, confrontations with them, but the confrontations he has were generally with Shammai, not Hillel. And you have Pharisees clearly demonstrating that, hey, he's with us. He's part of our group. So let's continue. So he was kind of turning the discussion, going, okay, you're so concerned with this extra stringency, but how about you look at yourself? How about you look at your own hearts and see how corrupt you are? So, how about you be concerned about things that matter? Not that this doesn't matter. Just like he said, you should do tithe the mint, dill, and cumin. You should do those things, but without neglecting the others. So he's saying you're neglecting the weightier matters of the written Torah. You're not even obeying the written Torah. So why are you pestering my disciples about whether they're following some traditions? And some of his disciples, again, were following this tradition. So if Yeshua had a problem with it, he would have told his disciples, cut it out. It's evil. He never did that. So continuing on. It was also telling them, you set aside the commandments of God to validate your own tradition. There's also issues of taking vows, which I'm not going to get into. A lot of them were taking vows inappropriately. The Pharisees of Shammai. Honor your father and mother, and you said he who speaks evil of father and mother put to death. But you say if anyone tells his father and mother whatever you might have gained from this korban, that is an offering to God, no longer permit him to do anything for his father and mother. That is the Shammai point of view. That is not Hillel, and that was later said that you can't do that. You can't override, even rabbinic Judaism today says you can't override the derisive commandments by revoting to commandment, stringencies and fences. So as the halacha ended out, this is completely wrong, and Yeshua is pointing that out. Then Yeshua called the crowd again and began saying, hear me, everyone, and understand there is nothing outside of a man that can make him unholy. By going into him, rather has come out of a man makes the man unholy. So again, he's switching the discussion to a moral discussion, not necessarily about the washing of hands issue. He's switching the discussion. He's using it as a metaphor. He's metaphorically talking about the inward purity. So he's saying to them, be as concerned with your inner purity, your midos, your actions, as you are about what you're doing with your hands. He wasn't even saying he wasn't saying the washing of hands was unimportant. But he was turning the tables on them. And then you also understand you don't grasp whatever goes in the mouth, for it doesn't enter into the heart, but into the stomach, and then goes out in the sewer, cleaning all food. This is often, now you have to understand the context of this. So they're talking about washing of hands. They're not talking about what is food. You see nowhere in this passage, he's like, well, now you can eat pork, guys. And this is totally mistranslated. NIV is one of the most worst translations of the Gospels possible in terms of the Jewishness, because they insert things, and so they insert, and Jesus declared all food clean. And then another one, the Amplified Bible or something talks about, and he disregard or he put away all the ritual, dietary laws. That's not in the original text. Sorry, it's not. That was someone who inserted it, their own interpretation, trying to clarify the passage, because they weren't Jewish. They didn't understand the in-house discussion. And I'm very passionate about this because I've just fed up with this passage being used in such horrible ways against observance. I gotta calm down. So so in terms of what he is considering food, for it doesn't enter, or then let's see. Don't you grasp whatever goes into a man cannot make him unholy. So you're eating kosher food. Like he's a Jew, he's a rabbi, he's in the 1st century, he's talking to Jews. There's nowhere ever in this historical context, logical historical context, this is basic hermeneutics, that he would ever be insinuating that you could eat pork now as Jews. The temple is standing. This is before the resurrection. Even after the resurrection, I went through Acts 10. Like he never, before, after, during his life, never talked about doing away with the dietary laws. He functions within them. He doesn't scold his disciples. He continues. And he goes on to talk about all these things that make you internally impure. So that was his point. So I'm just going to recap a little bit, because I think that was where that ends. So this 7 all the way through 22. So these are things that make you unholy, those list of things he gives. So it's an in-house discussion between Shammai and Hillel, whether or not everyone was required at that time to wash hands. They were not. It was a stringency that it had not been established by tradition. And even today is de rabboni. And if you're in a situation where you can't wash and you don't have any water, you can wipe your hands on a cloth or on the grass. Like it's not one of those things that there aren't ways around it. It's not like if you can't wash your hands with water, you can't eat. Okay, it's not that ridiculous. So, but people use this if you actually talk about the laws of hand washing, you would know this. But since most Christians and most Messianics have never studied the laws of hand washing, they wouldn't know that. My husband has studied it extensively. Any Orthodox Jew studied it extensively. And so you're going to have exceptions to the rule. When I don't have any water, what am I going to do? I'm going to starve to death? No. So, but that's, and so that's the issue there. And the priest in the temple, the Kohanim, wash their hands and their feet. And that was a command of God. And so these people are trying the Pharisees here in this context are going, we want not only the base of Mikdash to be holy, and we don't want to be just pure in the temple. We want to have our homes to be holy. We want to bring the holiness of the temple into our every action, which is beautiful. But Yeshua was pointing out to some of the Pharisees who had a wrong view, and they were flip-flopping it and going, well, the ritual hand washing and all these other traditions are much more important than how I treat people. Like he constantly went after them about how the Pharisees Shammai were treating fellow Jews and looking down upon them. So their in-house discussion of washing of hands. You have the text that a lot of English translations, and I can actually show you, and I think they need to be corrected, but because it causes a lot of problems. So if you go to the NIV, where is it? Oh, is it not? Maybe I have to do a search here. Search. I have to switch. I don't. All right. Yeah. See, in saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. That is not in the original text. NIV people need to take it out. It is wrong. It is deceitful. And it's anti-Semitic. So this is not. That's why it's in parentheses, y'all. Not in the text. So the Christians who want to claim that this passage is used to keep, we don't have to keep kosher anymore. And I mentioned this the other day. Gentiles even are in the fellowship issue and in Acts 15 are told to keep kosher meat. So that's not even in there. And Yeshua was also discussing, so he was switching the argument from washing of hands to what really matters on the inside. You're more concerned about what's on the outside than the inside. You're not matching up, which is his point. So I hope that clears up Mark 7. If you have any objections, questions, maybe I've missed something, please comment and let me know, because I want this to be a resource for people, and we want to, at Havasinam, want to be a resource for people, and we want to encourage people to study the scriptures within the context of which they are found, and not just make Christian interpretations or even Jewish interpretations that don't go along with the text. There's different opinions in Judaism, of course. But we need to see Yeshua in the Jewish context that he is, and not in the anti-Semitic interpretations of the church fathers and so forth. So I know there's a lot of well-meaning, and I'm not bashing on, Christians who don't know any better and have been mistaught by their pastors and other people. So I hope that this enlightens people. And I'm not, I'm passionate because this has been used so much against us and used against Orthodox believers, and it needs to stop because Yeshua was a rabbi and he upheld the traditions, but he also was concerned about midos. And this was an in-house discussion. It had nothing to do with keeping kosher, and some of his disciples kept these traditions, and some apparently didn't. So, and Paul, at the end of his life, I've mentioned this before, kept all the traditions of the fathers, which presumably would be also washing of hands and all the other ritual purity laws. So, hope you were edified by this, and I'm going to be posting this so people can have a discussion with me.